I know you're about to skip this, but don't. Something in you paused just for a second. Not because this looked different, not because you were searching, because something interrupted your pattern. That small hesitation. That's not random. Most people never notice when attention breaks from habit. They keep scrolling, they keep watching. They stay outside of their own life, observing, analyzing, waiting. You didn't. And that tells me something has already changed. Notice your breathing for a moment, not deeper, not slower. Just notice where it naturally sits. That slight stillness you feel. That's not relaxation. That's the moment observation begins to loosen. Because up until now, you've been in what I call the observer phase. You watched your life. You analyzed patterns. You noticed thoughts. You became aware. But you stayed separate. You were the one watching, not the one moving. And that phase has a purpose. It creates clarity. It breaks unconscious loops. It shows you what's been running, but it was never meant to be permanent. Because there comes a point where watching becomes delay, where awareness without movement starts creating friction. Notice your jaw right now. Is it slightly holding or already resting? That tension, if it's there, is what happens when awareness has outgrown observation but hasn't fully stepped into participation yet. That's where you are. This is the transition point. Not a big moment, not dramatic, just a quiet shift where separation begins to collapse. You're no longer just seeing patterns, you're starting to feel that you are inside them. And once that recognition begins, the observer phase starts to end. Not because you decide it, but because the system no longer supports distance. You can still watch things, but it won't feel the same. It will feel slower, less relevant, almost like you're holding yourself back. That's not confusion, that's transition. Because reality doesn't respond to observation alone. It responds to participation without hesitation. And once you cross into that, you don't go back to just watching. This is the first shift from distance to involvement, from analyzing to allowing movement. So before we go further, mark where you are. If you're still here, still focused, not distracted, comment, I see it. Not as motivation, as recognition. Now repeat this once slowly. I am no longer just observing. Again, I am no longer just observing. Don't force meaning. Just let the words land. In the next few minutes, we'll move into something more precise. How to recognize the exact moment. You shift from watching into participation without guessing. This part is not about understanding the shift. It's about noticing where it has already begun. The transition from observer to participant doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like confidence. It doesn't feel like a decision. It shows up as a loss of distance. Things you used to watch, you now feel inside. Situations don't stay out there. They start including you. Notice your breathing again, not changing it. Just noticing if it feels slightly closer, more present. That's the shift beginning. When you were in the observer phase, you could step back. You could say, I'm just noticing this, I'm just watching this pattern, and that created space. But now something is different. You're not just noticing anymore. You're in it while noticing. That's participation. Not action yet. Not movement. Just no separation. Notice your jaw. If there's even slight engagement, that's the system adjusting to being involved instead of distant. Here's the key recognition. You stop asking what's happening and start feeling I'm already inside this. No explanation, just presence. This is where most people hesitate because participation removes the comfort of distance. You can't hide behind awareness anymore. You can't stay in analysis. And that can feel unfamiliar, not overwhelming, just closer. Notice your shoulders. Are they slightly more engaged than before? That's not tension. That's orientation shifting forward. Let me make it precise. Observation. You and reality are separate participation. You and reality are the same, movement. And once that starts, you'll notice something subtle. You react less, but you also don't stay passive. There's a middle state forming. You don't withdraw, you don't overact. You respond without delay. That's the first sign participation is stabilizing. Not faster action, cleaner action. No buildup, no internal debate, just movement that doesn't feel forced. If you're noticing even a slight version of this, that's confirmation. You're not trying to step into life, you're already being moved inside it. Notice the center of your chest, not emotion, just whether there's a sense of presence or pressure. That's where the shift registers most clearly. So mark it again. If you're still here and you recognize even a part of this, and comment, "I'm inside it." Not as belief, as location. Now repeat slowly. I don't stand outside my life anymore. Again, I don't stand outside my life anymore. No force, no emotion, just recognition. In the next part, we go deeper into the exact point where awareness stops watching completely and something else begins operating through you. This is where the shift becomes irreversible. Up until now, awareness was something you used. You observed thoughts, you noticed patterns, you stepped back. Even in participation, there was still a sense of "I'm aware of this," but now something else begins to happen. Awareness stops standing apart. It stops watching not because you lose it, but because there is nothing left to stand outside of. Notice your breathing again, not as something you observe, but as something happening with you. That difference matters. When awareness is still watching, there is distance. When awareness stops watching, there is only experience happening without separation. Notice your jaw. If it softens here, that's the system dropping. The last layer of control, because watching requires control. It requires position. And that position is now dissolving. This is the moment most people don't recognize. They think they're losing awareness. They think they're becoming less conscious. That's not what's happening. You're becoming non-separate from what's happening. There is no observer here. There is no observed. There is only movement. And you are not watching it. You are inside it as it happens. Notice your shoulders. If they feel more neutral, not pulled back, not pushed forward, that's alignment without positioning. Let me make this precise. Observation, awareness, looking at reality, participation, awareness inside reality. This phase awareness as reality moving. No gap, no delay, no commentary required. This is why thinking slows here, not because you force it, but because thinking requires distance, and distance is no longer stable. You may notice something subtle. You don't narrate as much. You don't label as much. You don't step back to check yourself. Things just happen, and you are already there as they happen. That's the collapse beginning. Notice the center of your chest. Not emotion, just presence. If it feels more direct, less layered, that's confirmation. This is where control starts becoming unnecessary, because nothing is separate enough to control. If you're still here and this feels familiar, even slightly, as market comment, no distance, not a statement, as recognition. Now repeat slowly, I am not watching anymore. Again, I am not watching anymore. Let the words pass through. No need to hold them. In the next few minutes, we go into the full shift. When the distance between you and reality collapses completely and movement no longer feels like something you choose, but something that moves through you. This is not a transition anymore. This is the point where separation stops holding. Up until now, there was still a subtle gap. Even if you weren't fully observing, there was still a sense of "this is happening to me" or "I am inside this." Now even that begins to dissolve. Notice your breathing again, not as yours, not as something happening to you, just as movement. No owner, no distance. That's the shift. When the distance collapses, reality no longer feels external. It doesn't feel like something you face or something you move toward. It feels like one continuous field of movement that you are not separate from. Notice your jaw. If it's completely neutral now, that's the system no longer trying to position itself, because positioning requires distance, and distance is no longer stable. This is where control drops naturally. Not because you let go, but because there's nothing outside you to control and nothing inside you to hold back. Let me make this precise. Before reality happened and you responded, Now reality and response are the same moment. No gap, no delay, no second layer. You don't think, then act. You don't observe, then decide. Movement happens, and you are already in it. Notice your shoulders. If they feel balanced, not pulled, not resisting, that's alignment without effort. This is also where fear starts losing its structure, not because you remove it, but because fear depends on separation. It needs a you and a future. When distance collapses, there is no space for projection to build, only immediate movement. You may notice something subtle here. Things feel more direct, less filtered, less delayed, not intense, just immediate. That's not loss of control. That's removal of unnecessary layers. This is the point most people try to understand. But understanding requires stepping back. And stepping back is no longer available. So don't try to explain this. Just notice. Notice the center of your chest, not emotion, just presence. If it feels open or direct, that's where the collapse registers. If you're still here, fully here, mark it, comment, no separation, not as belief, as location. Now repeat slowly. There is no distance between me and reality. Again, there is no distance between me and reality. No force. Let it pass. In the next part, we move into something even more precise. How action begins to happen from this state. Without force, without hesitation, without overthinking. Stay here. Because now action changes not in what you do, but in where it comes from. Before action had a sequence. You noticed something. You thought about it. You decided. Then you acted. Even if it was fast, there was still a process. Now that process begins to disappear. Notice your breathing again. Not as something you manage, but as something already happening without your input. That's the model. Action begins the same way. It doesn't start with thinking. It doesn't start with effort. It starts as movement already underway. Notice your jaw. If it stays relaxed while imagining action, that means there's no internal resistance building before movement. That's new because resistance used to come first. You used to feel should. What if that layer is fading, not because you became confident, but because there is no distance left to hesitate inside? Let me make this precise. Old action, thought, decision, movement. This action, movement, awareness of movement. It's already happening and you become aware inside it. Notice your shoulders. If they feel naturally aligned, that's the body no longer preparing for action, because action is not separate anymore. This is what acting from the field actually means. Not mystical, not abstract, just no delay between impulse and expression. You don't push yourself to act. You don't motivate yourself. You find yourself already moving without needing to start. And here's the key. There is no urgency in it, because urgency comes from delay and delay is gone. So movement feels clean, direct, uncomplicated. You may notice you speak without rehearsing. You decide without looping. You move without building pressure, not faster, just without friction. Notice the center of your chest. If it feels steady, not tight, not heavy, that's the system operating without conflict. This is where trust becomes unnecessary, because there's nothing to trust. Movement is already happening and you are not initiating it. You are aligned with it as it happens. If you're still here and this feels even slightly familiar, mark it. Comment. I move with it not as motivation, as recognition. Now repeat slowly. I don't force action. I move as it happens. Again, I don't force action. I move as it happens. Let it pass. In the next part, we stabilize this, because this state can feel natural, but it needs to remain without interference. This part is not about reaching anything. It's about not losing what is already happening. The active state doesn't collapse because it's weak. It collapses when you start interfering again. Not through action, through subtle checking. Notice, your breathing still steady, still happening without you managing it. Now imagine trying to control it. That tension you feel, that's interference. The same thing happens here. You begin to ask, am I still in it? Is this working? Did I lose it? That's how the old pattern re-enters. Not forcefully, quietly. Notice your jaw. If it tightens when you check, That's the system stepping back into control mode. Stabilization is simple. You don't monitor the state. You remain inside it. There is no need to hold it, no need to protect it, because this state is not something you created. It's what remains when separation is gone. Let me make it clear. You don't stabilize this by doing more. You stabilize it by not reintroducing distance. No stepping back to analyze. No stepping out to confirm, just staying as the movement that's already happening. Notice your shoulders. If they stay neutral, not bracing, not pulling back, that's the body not preparing to fix anything. That's correct. Because nothing needs correction here. This is where many people make a mistake. They try to stay conscious. They try to hold awareness. That effort itself creates separation again. And the moment separation returns, you're back in observation. So don't try to stay aware. Stay undivided. Awareness is already present. You don't need to maintain it. Notice the center of your chest. If it feels steady without pressure, that's alignment without effort. This is the stabilized state. No monitoring, no adjusting, no internal commentary, just movement continuing as it is. If something shifts, you don't correct it. If something slows, you don't question it. Because stability doesn't come from control, it comes from non-inference. If you're still here, not thinking about it, just inside it, mark it, comment. I remain not as affirmation as location. Now repeat slowly. I don't step out of it. Again, I don't step out of it. Let it pass. In the final part, we complete this not by adding anything, but by locking this into direct creation, without returning to separation. Nothing new is being added. Now this is where everything becomes fixed without force. Direct creation doesn't begin when you decide to create. It begins when there is no distance left between you and what's happening. And that has already occurred. Notice your breathing one last time. Not as something you observe, not as something you control, just as movement. That's how creation works here. Not initiated, not planned, but happening with you already inside it. What locks now is not an outcome. It's how movement happens through you. No delay, no separation, no second layer. This is why it holds, because there's nothing left to interrupt it. Notice your jaw. If it's resting, that's confirmation. No control, no holding, just continuation. From this point, reality doesn't wait for you. It doesn't stand in front of you. It moves as you. And once this is recognized, you don't return to watching the same way again. That's the lock. Quiet, stable, irreversible. Notice the center of your chest. Not emotion, just presence. If it feels direct, that's where the shift has stabilized. Now confirm it. Say this slowly. I am not separate from what I create. Again, I am not separate from what I create. No force. Let it pass. From here, something changes in a very practical way. You stop waiting for the right moment. You stop overthinking simple movements. You stop stepping back to check yourself again and again. Things begin to move cleaner, not faster, not louder, just without friction. That's how you'll notice this working. Now, before we close this, I want to say something directly. Over the past few months, I haven't been consistent here. I was dealing with health issues and it slowed everything down. But if you're still here, still watching, still staying, that tells me something important. You're not here for constant uploads. You're here for real alignment, and I respect that. So, thank you for staying. If this helped you recognize something, not learn but recognize, then mark it. Comment locked in. And if you want to keep going deeper into this kind of work, subscribe. Not for content, for continuity. Because from here, we're not repeating ideas, we're refining alignment. Now, one final activation. Keep it simple. I move as reality moves. I create by being inside it. Again, I move as reality moves. I create by being inside it. Let it settle. No repetition needed. Stay exactly where you are. There is nothing to go back to. Thanks for watching.